Good to see everybody today, and as always, it's lovely to gather as a Sangha. The light is changing, and the seasons are changing, and as often happens, coming back from retreat, I have creative ideas about how we can study the Dharma together. And as I was preparing for class today, I went back and checked, and we have been meeting uninterruptedly on Sundays for 5.5 years. So not the exact day of our anniversary, but quite something to think of all we've accomplished in 5.5 years in terms of growing together, being vulnerable, learning about how our minds work, and using the classics of Buddhism. So we started just as COVID was closing down the country. We started in May of 2020. And in general, this Sunday gathering became an exploration of how to live a compassionate life in the context of the fear and chaos that was erupting in the world due to COVID. And over this period of time, we've studied some of the incredible classic texts on mind training and compassion, and in general have worked with combining study with periodic retreats, half-day, weekend, 4-day, 10-day retreats, and expanding our capacity to hold our hearts open using the great meditation trainings of Tonglen and loving kindness that are the components of bodhicitta. The texts that we've studied are classic, the Bodhisattva's Way of Life, the huge volume on the stages of mind training, Trungpa Rinpoche's incredible texts on Shamatha Vipassana, and most recently Thich Nhat Hanh on the Heart Sutra. And I feel as though in this class, it's time to really see how all of these components fit together and are really unified, and how we can continue to explore, let's say, the Four Noble Truths in multifaceted ways, looking at how does suffering arise in our lives, what are the causes of suffering, what practices start to assuage, diminish, and uproot suffering, and how does this become a path, compassionate living as a path. So this will certainly continue. It's very valuable for all of us. And at the same time, because it's such a strong foundation, there are some people who wish to go into the practice of meditation in greater depth and more traditionally Buddhist in a very specific way. So in the new year, I'll be opening a second class that really invites deeper practice, a more thorough understanding of practice. And to that end, I'll be offering an orientation and then inviting people to write to me about why they wish to take part and what their commitment might be. So it's not restricted, but it is standing up, let's say, and saying, now I'm ready to make a deeper commitment to meditation. In this class, for right now, as we continue with putting the Dharma into practice, in this world that is always, filled with obstacles for us personally, but as we see in the World Peace Prayer, great stress and trauma and wars and climate change, how to hold our focus as people committed to a compassionate way of life and a way that contributes loving kindness into these situations. In essence, not losing our focus in the chaos, but holding that focus and becoming a witness to loving kindness in whatever is arising. And the text that I'd like to reference for the next couple of months is Pema Chodron's The Places That Scare You. So right now, the world's a little scary, so we'll be studying, how do we open up those places that scare us and use that as a basis for our practice. And I've chosen this book because I go back to it over and over as a reference in my practice and in my personal life, probably since it was published. And I remember being in retreat, goodness, in the early 2000s, holding on to that book for dear life. So it's certainly been a reference for a couple decades for me. And you could say it's Bodhicitta for the scary times. So we'll be using this book as a reference, and we'll be looking at our loving kindness and compassionate training in a way that unifies the different texts that we've studied and the different practices that we've worked with. And I took a few excerpts from the very first chapter. And in the first chapter, and I think maybe you'll recognize this, Venerable Pema Chodron goes back to her earliest touching base with bodhicitta. And it was a memory of a neighbor woman sitting on a porch calling out to her when she was a small child. And the older woman called out, "Little girl, don't you let life go hardening your heart." So I think we can all relate to the many different kinds of experiences in life that give rise to that feeling of hardening in protection, and how that is connected to our suffering, not only in our experience of hardening, but then the behaviors that result from that hardening and that, in some ways injures others. And we certainly have experienced this, as we look forward to family, and whether it's found family or biological families, our relationships, when they go through those uneven periods, and how much pain they can cause us, and how much we wish to heal those relationships. So the word bodhicitta, citta is mind, heart, but it also can be attitude, and bodhi means awakened, enlightened, or completely gone. Now, we recognize that word completely gone from our study of the Heart Sutra. And that's a reference of the range of bodhicitta, of relative interactions where there is a we and a they, an I and a you, our allegiances, clans, families, nationalities, and all sentient beings, how we relate to we and they, versus what we were studying in the Heart Sutra, a vast, interconnected interbeing. So the range of bodhicitta is from our perspective that arises when we're living in all of these relationships and, in this wonderful and wounded world of I, we, and they, and interconnected interbeing, the whole range, and how the path is those experiences that open along this spectrum, taking us from easily triggered to a wide open interbeing. She references her training in bodhicitta. And the emphasis in her training as seeing bodhicitta as a very soft spot in our heart, and that softness is so tender and so easily wounded that she compares it to the tenderness of an open wound. If you have a scratch or an injury, just touching it is very painful. So that unprotected state and how reactive and responsive it is, and how we can train in maintaining that open responsiveness without the reaction, and allow that propensity to be a openness to the pain that's shared by being alive, and the doorway to compassion and kindness. And she says to that issue, but bodhicitta is also becoming acquainted with compassion, our ability to feel the pain that we share with others. Without realizing, we continually shield ourselves from pain because it scares us. So we're awakening to the process of shielding and the fear that arises in our meditation practice. And we're also awakening to how we have put up, as she says, protective walls of opinions, prejudices, strategies, and barriers that are built on a deep fear of being hurt. So in our lives, we have been hurt and we have felt pain, and without realizing it, all of these walls have arisen, and there comes a time of tearing down the walls. She goes on, these walls are fully fortified by emotions of all kinds of anger, craving, indifference, jealousy, envy, anger, arrogance, and pride. But fortunately for us, the soft spots, our ability to love and care about things, is like a crack in the walls that we've erected. And it's a natural opening in the barriers. With our meditation practice, we are learning to find this opening. We can learn to seize the vulnerable moment of love, gratitude, loneliness, embarrassment, and inadequacy to awaken bodhicitta. So this isn't something we graduate from. Our exploration of bodhicitta continues on this spectrum, and even some translations of the word Buddha or Sangha have to do with ever expanding. So we come back to this practice over and over again as our home base, because everything we've done in meditation and everything that we've done in our studies is allowing us to continue along the spectrum with continuous expansion and radiation of bodhicitta. So we'll be going slowly again and seeing how the stages of the practice draw from everything we've been learning, starting with first connecting with our natural, soft, tender heart, our open, undefended heart-mind. And we'll begin with loving kindness practice. And His Holiness Chetsang Rinpoche has instructed over and over again that the most accessible manner of connecting with bodhicitta is to imagine a little child or a puppy right in front of you, a toddler that's just laughing and walking towards you. And you can, if you have any kind of animals or experience with animals, a puppy or a kitten that is just, you've just come home and they're jumping for joy. You may also experience this in nature, seeing the ocean, seeing the trees. So what we're talking about in this first instruction is what is the recognition we have from experience of what that feeling of bodhicitta is that's free and fearless and free of judgment. And once we've identified that feeling, it becomes a shamatha practice. This is the feeling, and this is resting in this feeling without being distracted. So first, let's take a few minutes just to recognize the feeling. Each person, will draw on a memory from their own lives to evoke the feeling. But once the feeling is evoked, absolutely drop the story. It's not about the story itself. It's what your heart-mind experiences as a pervasive, full-bodied, full-mind, open, loving, and warm state of being. So first, let's identify that. Go ahead and take a moment. Once you have evoked with a story or a memory, then drop it entirely and just rest in that feeling. As you're resting in the feeling and learning how to abide in that feeling, you start to see how we're applying the experience from shamatha. How easily are we distracted? Is the feeling so weak that we have to keep calling the memory again and again just to feel the feeling? does it wax and wane? If we're distracted, is it every few seconds? Is it whole stories that are arising, whole narratives that are arising? Do you quickly remember, oh yes, this is bodhicitta practice, and come back? So we start to see that our ability to even hold one clear, fairly abstract meditative focus is dependent on how we have been cultivating our shamatha practice, how to learn how to become undistracted. And as we are all starting out with these simple instructions, we see that most likely we're starting with something relative. I'm imagining my grandniece at like 1.5. So there's an I, there's the little toddler, and there's the feeling. So it's very much relative. Along the spectrum of interbeing, there's a whole process of opening in the strength of that feeling, the continuity of the feeling, no longer the necessity of any kind of story, and eventually the dropping away of any kind of I'm over here and the toddler's over there. But this morning we're just starting very simply, and let's meditate in this way for, let's say 10 minutes, and just noticing the relationship that you have, first of all, to connecting to bodhicitta, learning about that. That's not an easy thing for many, many people. There are many people who are experiencing a time of healing in their life or a time of depletion in their life. And for those folks, you might want to imagine a spiritual teacher or perhaps the sun filling you with bodhicitta, so it's even more effortless. So just sort of notice where you are in your relationship to touching base with this warm, open heart, and the relationship you have with distraction. No judgments anywhere. Just in this simple meditation, acknowledging there are lots of different factors going on. Okay, so let's begin again. And coming back. And I'd like to invite you to just share with each other your experience cultivating that warm heart-mind, easy, difficult, medium. What was that like for you? And then the state of abiding, applying your knowledge of shamatha, understanding distraction and non-distraction.